step into the spine-chilling world of Trump Tower like never before as we unravel three terrifying tales of mystery, horror, and the supernatural lurking within its opulent walls. Dare to watch till the end and uncover the dark secrets that await. Subscribe now for more haunting stories. Story 1. The Tower's Shadows. In the heart of Manhattan, a looming structure known as Trump Tower stood tall and proud, casting a long shadow over the bustling city below. Its gold-tinted windows gleamed in the fading light of the autumn evening, a beacon of power and wealth. For Jack Thompson, a young journalist, the tower was more than a symbol. It was the site of his next big story. Rumors had swirled for years about the strange occurrences within its walls, and Jack was determined to uncover the truth. Jack entered the opulent lobby, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. A chill ran down his spine as he approached the elevator, its mirrored doors reflecting his anxious face. He was here to interview Donald Trump, the enigmatic figure who had once dominated headlines but had since retreated into the shadows of his own empire. As the elevator doors slid shut, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The ride to the penthouse seemed to stretch on forever, the air growing colder with each passing floor. Jack's ears popped, and he felt a strange pressure in his chest. The soft hum of the elevator was suddenly interrupted by a whispering voice, faint but unmistakable. "Turn back." Jack's heart pounded in his chest. He spun around, but he was alone. The voice had come from nowhere, and yet it seemed to echo all around him. The doors opened with a ding, revealing a dimly lit corridor. Jack hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to leave, but his determination to uncover the story pushed him forward. The corridor was lined with portraits, all of Trump at various stages of his life. Jack couldn't help but notice the eyes in the paintings seemed to follow him as he walked. He reached the grand double doors at the end of the hall and knocked, his hand trembling. Enter came a deep, gravelly voice from within. Jack pushed the doors open and stepped into a lavish office. Behind a massive oak desk sat Donald Trump, his face partially hidden in the shadows. The room was filled with an eerie silence, broken only by the ticking of an ornate grandfather clock in the corner. "Mr. Trump," Jack began, forcing a smile. "Thank you for agreeing to this interview." Trump leaned forward, his eyes glinting in the dim light. "Of course, Jack. I always enjoy speaking with the media." Jack took a seat, feeling the weight of Trump's gaze on him. As he began his questions, he couldn't shake the sense of unease that had settled over him. Trump answered each question with a calm, measured tone, but there was something unsettling about his demeanor, as if he were hiding something. As the interview progressed, Jack's unease grew. He noticed strange details, the way Trump's shadow seemed to move independently, the flickering lights that cast eerie patterns on the walls, the faint sound of whispering that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. "Mr. Trump," Jack said, trying to steady his voice, "there have been rumors about this building. People say it's haunted. Have you ever experienced anything unusual?" Trump's eyes narrowed, and a slow, chilling smile spread across his face. "Haunted, you say? Perhaps. Or maybe it's just the weight of power that creates such illusions." Suddenly the room grew colder, and the whispering grew louder, more insistent. Jack's vision blurred, and he felt a wave of dizziness wash over him. The portraits on the walls seemed to come to life, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Trump stood, his shadow stretching impossibly long, engulfing Jack in darkness. "You shouldn't have come here, Jack," he said, his voice echoing with an otherworldly resonance. "Some truths are better left buried." Jack tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't obey. The whispering grew to a deafening roar, and the walls seemed to close in around him. He gasped for breath, his mind racing with terror. The last thing Jack saw before everything went black was Trump's face, no longer human but twisted into a grotesque mask of malevolent power. When Jack woke, he was lying on the cold marble floor of the lobby, the golden light of dawn streaming through the windows. He scrambled to his feet, his mind reeling. Had it all been a dream? As he staggered out of the tower, he glanced back and his blood ran cold. In one of the mirrored windows, he saw not his reflection, but the twisted, smiling visage of Donald Trump, watching him with eyes that gleamed with a dark, otherworldly power. Jack fled into the bustling streets of Manhattan, but he knew he would never escape the shadow of the tower. And as the days passed, he couldn't shake the feeling that Trump was still watching, waiting, and that the true horror was yet to come. Story 2. Emma had always been fascinated by urban legends, and New York City was full of them. Her latest obsession was the tale of the haunted mirror in Trump Tower. The story went that anyone who looked into it would see their worst fears reflected back at them, and some claimed that those who stared too long disappeared entirely. Emma, a skeptic by nature and a blogger by trade, decided to investigate. One crisp autumn afternoon, she found herself standing before the towering structure. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the city, but the tower itself seemed to absorb the light, its reflective surface dull and cold. She took a deep breath and stepped inside, her footsteps echoing on the polished marble floor. Emma approached the reception desk, her pulse quickening. "I'm here to see the mirror," she said, trying to sound confident. The receptionist, an older woman with a stern expression, looked up and narrowed her eyes. "You're not the first," she muttered, handing Emma a visitor's pass. "10th floor. You'll know it when you see it." Emma nodded and headed for the elevator, her excitement mingling with a growing sense of unease. The ride was smooth and silent, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The mirrored walls of the elevator reflected her image back at her, and for a moment she thought she saw something move in the reflection, a flicker of shadow that didn't belong. She shook her head, blaming her imagination. The elevator doors opened to a dimly lit corridor. Emma stepped out, her senses on high alert. The air was colder here, and a faint, musty smell lingered. She walked slowly, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. As she turned a corner, she saw a large, ornate mirror standing alone at the end of the hall. The mirror was beautiful, its gilded frame intricately carved with swirling patterns that seemed to writhe and twist in the flickering light. Emma approached cautiously, her heart pounding. She could see her reflection, but there was something strange about it. Her reflection seemed to shimmer and waver, as if she were looking through water. She reached out to touch the mirror, her fingers brushing against the cold glass. The moment she made contact, a chill shot through her body, and she gasped, jerking her hand back. The mirror's surface rippled like liquid, and her reflection twisted and distorted. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she watched her reflection change. Her face grew gaunt, her eyes hollow and sunken. Dark veins spread across her skin, and her mouth twisted into a grotesque grin. She tried to look away, but she was transfixed, unable to move. "Don't look too long," a voice whispered from behind her. Emma spun around, but the corridor was empty. Her heart raced and she turned back to the mirror. Her reflection was gone, replaced by a dark void that seemed to pull at her, drawing her in. Suddenly, she felt a presence behind her. She spun around again, and this time she saw Donald Trump standing at the end of the corridor. His face was shrouded in shadow, but she could see his eyes glinting with a cold, malevolent light. "Curiosity killed the cat," he said, his voice low and mocking, and satisfaction didn't bring it back. Emma tried to speak, but no words came out. She backed away, her eyes darting between Trump and the mirror. The void in the mirror seemed to grow, and she felt an invisible force pulling her towards it. "You're just like the others," Trump continued, his voice echoing in the empty hall. "Always seeking the truth, never satisfied with what you have." Emma's mind raced, panic setting in. She tried to run, but her feet wouldn't move. The force from the mirror grew stronger, pulling her closer. She reached out, grasping for anything to hold on to, but there was nothing. As she was pulled into the mirror, her surroundings dissolved into darkness. She felt herself falling, the air rushing past her. She screamed, but no sound escaped her lips. The last thing she saw before the darkness consumed her was Trump's face, twisted into a sinister grin. When Emma woke, she was no longer in the corridor. She was in a small, dark room, the only light coming from the mirror on the wall. She approached it slowly, dread filling her heart. When she looked into the mirror, she saw not her own reflection, but the distorted faces of all those who had come before her, their eyes filled with despair. She tried to scream, but her reflection only grinned back at her, its hollow eyes glinting with a cold, malevolent light. Emma realized with a sinking feeling that she was trapped, and in the depths of the mirror, she heard the whispering voices of the others, telling her that there was no escape. Outside, in the real world, the mirror stood silently, its surface smooth and unblemished. The corridor was empty once more, and the tower loomed above the city, its shadow long and dark. The legend of the haunted mirror would continue, and Emma's story would be just another whisper in the halls of Trump Tower. Story 3. The Golden Room. Sarah had been working as a historian for the past decade, specializing in the enigmatic lives of the rich and powerful. Her latest project had brought her to Trump Tower, the infamous building in Manhattan, where she hoped to uncover hidden aspects of Donald Trump's life for her new book. She had been granted unprecedented access to the tower, an opportunity too tantalizing to resist. The day she arrived, a storm brewed over the city, casting an ominous pall over the skyscrapers. Lightning forked across the sky as Sarah entered the tower, her steps echoing in the cavernous lobby. She glanced around, her unease growing as she noticed the absence of people. It felt like the building itself was holding its breath, waiting. The receptionist, a severe woman with sharp features, handed Sarah a keycard. "You're to go to the Golden Room on the 56th floor," she said, her voice flat. "Mr. Trump himself used to spend a lot of time there." Sarah thanked her and made her way to the elevator. The ride was smooth, but the higher she ascended, the more oppressive the air became. The walls of the elevator, lined with mirrors, seemed to close in on her. She could see her reflection, pale and anxious, in the glass. Her heart pounded in her chest as she exited onto the 56th floor. The corridor was lavishly decorated, with thick carpets and golden fixtures that gleamed in the dim light. The air smelled faintly of expensive cologne, mingled with something else, something metallic. As she walked, the sound of her footsteps was swallowed by the thick carpeting, creating an eerie silence. She reached the door to the Golden Room and paused, her hand trembling as she inserted the keycard. The door swung open with a soft creak, revealing a room unlike any she had ever seen. The Golden Room was aptly named. Everything inside glittered with a golden sheen. The walls, the furniture, even the light itself seemed to shimmer unnaturally. The centerpiece was a large, ornate chair, its back turned to the door. Sarah's unease grew as she stepped inside, the door closing softly behind her. She approached the chair, her breath catching in her throat. As she rounded it, she saw that it was empty, but the cushions were indented, as if someone had been sitting there just moments before. She reached out to touch it, but pulled her hand back as a cold chill ran through her body. Suddenly, the door behind her slammed shut, and the room plunged into darkness. Sarah fumbled for her flashlight, her hands shaking. When she finally turned it on, the beam revealed a disturbing sight. The golden surfaces were tarnished and streaked with dark, rust-colored stains. Her pulse quickened as she scanned the room, the flashlight flickering. She noticed a series of photographs on the wall, each one depicting Trump at different stages of his life. But as she moved closer, she realized that the images were wrong. His eyes seemed to follow her, and his expression twisted into a malevolent grin. A cold whisper echoed through the room, making her skin crawl. "You shouldn't have come here." Sarah spun around but saw no one. The whisper came again, louder this time. "He sees you." Her flashlight flickered and went out, plunging her into darkness once more. She backed up against the wall, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She felt something cold and slimy brush against her hand, and she screamed, dropping the flashlight. In the darkness, she heard the soft creak of the chair turning. Panic surged through her, and she scrambled to pick up the flashlight. When she turned it on, she saw the chair facing her, and in it sat Donald Trump. But this was not the Trump she had seen in the photographs. His skin was pale and translucent, his eyes sunken and glowing with a sinister light. "Welcome, Sarah," he said, his voice a rasping whisper. "I've been waiting for you." She backed away, her mind racing. This couldn't be real, it had to be a nightmare. But the terror she felt was all too real. The air grew colder, and she felt a force pulling her towards the chair. "You wanted to know my secrets," Trump said, his grin widening. "Now you'll learn them all." The force intensified, and Sarah felt herself being dragged towards the chair. She tried to resist, but her limbs were heavy and unresponsive. She screamed as she was pulled into the chair, the cold seeping into her bones. The last thing she saw before everything went black was Trump's face, inches from hers, his eyes burning with an otherworldly fire. His voice echoed in her mind as darkness claimed her. "Now you belong to the tower." When the cleaning staff found the golden room the next morning, it was pristine, with no sign of Sarah. The chair was empty, but those who looked closely would swear they saw a shadowy figure reflected in the golden surfaces, watching, waiting for the next curious soul to come and uncover its secrets. If these 3 harrowing tales from Trump Tower left you breathless, imagine what other dark secrets we have yet to uncover. Hit that subscribe button and join us as we dive deeper into the spine-tingling mysteries that lie ahead.